Dean Thomas isn't one to hold back, and ahead of UFC 321, the veteran analyst sparked a wave of discussion with his brutally honest take on the co-main event between Mackenzie Dern and Virna Jandiroba. The two elite grapplers are set to rematch for the vacant UFC strawweight title, but according to Thomas, the matchup lacks the buzz and prestige typically associated with a championship fight. With Weili Zhang vacating her belt to move up in weight and challenge Valentina Shevchenko for flyweight gold, the strawweight division suddenly found itself without a reigning queen. The UFC quickly booked Dern versus Jandiroba 2 to fill that void, banking on their name recognition and stylistic clash to anchor the co-main event of a massive pay-per-view card. Still, Thomas believes that, from a fan interest standpoint, the fight simply doesn't resonate. "I mean this with all due respect," Thomas said on the On Paper with Anthony Smith podcast. "I'm trying to be as respectful, but has there ever been a more insignificant title fight in recent memory? You get where I'm coming from, right? No one seems to even care or have batted an eye at this fight." Thomas's blunt assessment speaks to a sentiment shared by some fans online. While both Dern and Jandiroba are world-class submission artists with strong resumes, the matchup lacks the star power and storyline drama that typically define championship bouts. With the spotlight largely dominated by Tom Aspinall versus Ciryl Gane in the main event, the strawweight title fight has been somewhat overshadowed, and Thomas didn't hesitate to point that out. That said, while he might question the fight's significance, Thomas has no doubt about who will leave Abu Dhabi with the gold. Mackenzie Dern punches as hard as anybody in the division. She grapples as well as anybody in the division. She's got gas for days. She doesn't get tired. It's just sometimes she doesn't seem like she even cares about fighting. Thomas expressed frustration at what he sees as a lack of consistency and commitment from Dern, referencing a conversation they had during a previous analyst segment. "I've spoken to her on the desk, and she told me, I didn't really know how to shoot takedowns with punches. She was already professional and didn't know these things. I'm thinking, how did you make it so far?" Still, Thomas emphasized that when focused and disciplined, Dern possesses all the tools to dominate. With elite-level Brazilian jiu-jitsu, underrated striking power, and exceptional athleticism, the 31-year-old former ADCC world champion has the potential to finally put it all together on the biggest stage of her career. She's been in combat her entire life. If she takes it seriously, I think she should win this fight pretty handily. Their first meeting back in 2020 was a competitive, gritty affair that Dern won by unanimous decision. Both women have improved since then. Jandiroba has rounded out her striking, while Dern has sharpened her wrestling and cardio under new coaching. But this time, with the world title on the line, the stakes are far higher. Even if Dean Thomas's comments have divided fans, they've also reignited interest in a fight that many were overlooking. Whether it's a showcase of Dern's long-promised potential or the crowning of Jandiroba as Brazil's next champion, UFC 321's co-main event may prove more meaningful than Thomas anticipates, at least once the cage door closes.
Dana White has never been one to mince words, and once again the UFC CEO didn't hold back when addressing Tom Aspinall's recent comments about potentially vacating his title rather than facing a close friend. With UFC 321 just days away, where Aspinall will defend his undisputed heavyweight championship against Ciryl Gane, the Englishman has found himself in a bit of controversy, not over trash talk, but over loyalty. Aspinall, who rose to the top of the division through an impressive string of finishes and resilience, made waves earlier this week when he admitted that if his teammate and friend Ante Delija ever earned a title shot, he would rather vacate the belt than fight him. The revelation came as a surprise to many given the competitive nature of the sport and the rarity of fighters outright refusing a potential championship bout. Delija, a former PFL heavyweight champion, made a thunderous entrance into the UFC with a knockout victory over Marcin Tybura at UFC Paris earlier this year, immediately establishing himself as a legitimate threat in the division. With his ranking rapidly rising, it's not far-fetched to imagine that he could soon be in line for a crack at UFC Gold, a scenario that's now complicated by his friendship with Aspinall. When asked about the situation during an interview with TNT Sports, Dana White's expression said it all before he even began speaking. Clearly irritated by the idea, White described Aspinall's comments as insane, emphasizing that the sport has always been about competition first, relationship second. You know what I think about it? I hate that. Many friends, teammates, even family members have fought each other before. That's what this sport is about. You're not fighting out of hatred, you're fighting to prove who's the best. That's the nature of this game. The UFC boss continued, adding that while he respects Aspinall's right to make his own decisions, he finds the notion of vacating the belt over personal ties completely unreasonable. To think about vacating because you don't want to compete against somebody is insane. But he's a grown man and it's up to him. I can't force anyone to fight, but you're the champion. You're supposed to fight whoever's next in line. The exchange highlights a long-standing philosophical divide between the UFC's business-first mentality and the loyalty-driven culture often found in close-knit gyms. Fighters like Kamaru Usman and Gilbert Burns, for example, trained together for years under the same coach before agreeing to fight for the welterweight title in 2021. Others, like Daniel Cormier and Cain Velasquez, never fought one another but faced little scrutiny because the division allowed them to avoid it. In Aspinall's case, though, White's frustration seems to stem from timing and optics. As the first undisputed heavyweight champion since John Jones's abrupt retirement, Aspinall is expected to carry the division forward, a division that, by UFC standards, cannot afford indecision at the top. For the UFC CEO, talk of vacating belts for personal reasons could cast doubt on the championship's legitimacy. Meanwhile, Delija remains focused on climbing the ladder, reportedly eyeing a fight with another ranked opponent later this year. If he continues to perform as impressively as he did in his debut, the UFC will soon have to address the elephant in the room, whether friendship or business takes precedence in the heavyweight division.
Just hours before one of the year's most anticipated UFC events, the UFC 321 card in Abu Dhabi has taken an unexpected hit. What was shaping up to be a packed night of elite competition, headlined by Tom Aspinall defending his undisputed heavyweight title against Ciryl Gane, has lost a key undercard matchup between two rising lightweight prospects, Matheus Camilo and Abdelkarim Al-Salwati. The fight, scheduled for the early prelims, was called off on Thursday evening for undisclosed reasons, according to MMA journalist Marcel Dorf. The timing of the cancellation has sent shockwaves through fans and fighters alike, as both men were eager to make a statement on a card already loaded with global attention. The cancellation marks another frustrating chapter in Abdelkarim Al-Salwati's UFC journey. The Jordanian lightweight, who first burst onto the scene after earning his contract on Dana White's Contender Series in 2023, has now seen 4 of his last scheduled bouts fall through. Al-Salwati was set to face Balaji Oki earlier this year, only for that matchup to collapse when Oki suffered an injury. Prior to that, visa issues and opponent withdrawal have kept him sidelined more often than not, preventing him from finding consistent rhythm inside the octagon. Al-Salwati's lone UFC appearance came in March 2024, when he suffered a third-round TKO loss to Loic Rajabov. It was a disappointing debut for a fighter who arrived in the promotion with high expectations, after capturing regional titles and showcasing his all-action style on the Contender Series. With another cancellation now behind him, questions will inevitably arise about his future activity and whether the UFC can find a way to keep him more consistently booked. For Matheus Camilo, the cancellation is equally frustrating. The Brazilian lightweight was looking to rebound from his May loss to Gabe Green, a defeat that snapped his 6-fight winning streak and temporarily slowed his rise through the ranks. UFC 321 was meant to be a chance at redemption, a platform to re-establish himself among the division's new wave of talent. Now he'll have to wait a little longer to make that statement. The loss of Camilo versus Al-Sawadi reduces the UFC 321 lineup to 13 fights, but the event remains stacked from top to bottom. In addition to the heavyweight title clash between Aspinall and Gane, the co-main event will see Mackenzie Dern rematching Verna Jandiroba for the vacant strawweight championship. Meanwhile, Umar Nurmagomedov returns to action against Mario Bautista in a crucial bantamweight bout that could determine the next title challenger.
Khamzat Chimaev has never been one to let comments about him slide, and his fiery personality once again came to the forefront after hearing Ikram Aliskerov mention his name in a recent interview. What might have seemed like a respectful and measured call-out to most quickly turned into a public exchange laced with frustration and pride, the kind of emotional tension that often brews between fighters who share deep regional and cultural roots. Aliskerov, who was once considered one of the most dangerous rising prospects in Europe before joining the UFC, has slowly been carving out his place in the middleweight division. Despite a recent setback against Robert Whittaker, the Dagestani standout bounced back with an impressive win over Andre Muniz, re-establishing himself as a name worth paying attention to. When asked about Chimaev's recent title victory and whether he'd be interested in a rematch, Aliskerov's tone was confident but not disrespectful. He praised Chimaev's skill, acknowledged his own readiness, and simply expressed that if an opportunity for gold presented itself, he'd take it without hesitation. But Chimaev, whose rise has been marked as much by his ferocity as his sensitivity to perceived slights, didn't take the remarks lightly. In his eyes, there was more to Aliskerov's comments than just competition. Responding in a fiery Instagram comment, the UFC middleweight champion accused his former opponent of hypocrisy and double standards, particularly when it came to the reactions from fans and media. "Why do people give interviews to these idiots?" Chimaev wrote, before adding, "When I said I'll fight someone from Dagestan, it's an inter-ethnic problem. When they say they'll fight me, it's sport. Stop being hypocritical." The tension between the two fighters runs deeper than the standard call-out narrative. Chimaev and Aliskerov share history dating back to their Brave CF days, when they clashed in one of the most competitive fights of Chimaev's early career. Though Chimaev emerged victorious with a spectacular knockout, he later admitted that Aliskerov had pushed him harder than anyone else before he joined the UFC. That history, combined with their shared regional and cultural backgrounds, adds a complex layer to their relationship, one that seems to oscillate between respect and rivalry. Chimaev, who recently captured the UFC middleweight title by defeating Dricus du Plessis in a gritty war at UFC 319, is currently in an interesting phase of his career. With the belt finally around his waist after years of hype and domination across two divisions, he's faced not only physical challenges, but also the mounting expectations that come with superstardom. His reputation as a fearsome fighter and his deep connection to his roots have made him a polarizing figure, beloved by some for his intensity and authenticity, and criticized by others for his volatility. For Aliskerov, the exchange is likely less personal and more professional. A rematch with Chimaev would not only give him a chance at revenge, but also the biggest payday and spotlight of his career. And while the Dagestani contender hasn't shown any signs of hostility toward the champion, his confidence in being ready for such a fight at any time might have triggered something deeper in Chimaev, perhaps a reminder of the one man he once called his toughest test. Despite the heated reaction, the idea of a Chimaev-Aliskerov rematch isn't far-fetched. The UFC middleweight division remains in flux, with contenders like Anthony Hernandez and Nasruddin Imavov also in the mix for a potential shot at the title. Still, given the history and emotional intensity between the two, Chimaev-Aliskerov could easily evolve into one of the most compelling storylines in the division if both fighters continue to win. Ciryl Gane looks to be in the best shape of his career, heading into his third shot at undisputed UFC gold this Saturday at UFC 321 in Abu Dhabi. The French heavyweight, known for his elite movement and technical striking, will challenge Tom Aspinall for the undisputed heavyweight championship in the pay-per-view main event. This marks Gane's third attempt at the undisputed title after falling short against Francis Ngannou in 2022 and John Jones in 2023. Despite those setbacks, Gane appears more determined than ever. New photos from Fight Week show Gane sporting a noticeably leaner, more muscular physique compared to previous outings, sparking buzz among fans and analysts. According to a recent post by MMA Orbit on X, Gane's 2025 conditioning is a night and day difference from his 2022 form, particularly his back and shoulder development, which many believe could improve his grappling strength and takedown defense, two areas that have cost him in past title fights. Ciryl looks absolutely locked in, one fan wrote in response. If this goes into the later rounds, Aspinall could be in trouble. Another commented, "That's a championship-level shape right there." However, not everyone is convinced Gane's new look will translate into victory. Some fans were quick to remind others that physique doesn't always equal performance inside the octagon. Having a six-pack won't stop the takedowns, one commenter wrote. He'll still have to deal with Aspinall's speed and pressure. Gane's renewed focus comes after a dominant rebound win over Sergey Spivak, where he showcased improved wrestling defense and crisp striking combinations. With momentum back on his side and a revamped training approach, Gane believes this is finally his time to claim undisputed gold. Aspinall, meanwhile, enters the bout as the reigning champion and heavy favorite after stopping Curtis Blaydes to capture the interim belt before being promoted following John Jones's retirement. The British powerhouse has finished all but one of his wins in the first round, making him one of the most efficient heavyweights in UFC history. Still, Gane's confidence and physical transformation have made many reconsider their predictions ahead of UFC 321. Whether his new form translates to victory remains to be seen, but one thing is certain, Ciryl Gane has never looked more ready for a championship fight.
Robert Whittaker believes there's no better time than now for a showdown with Sean Strickland, and he wants it to happen on one of the most unique stages in combat sports history, the upcoming UFC card in front of the White House. For Whittaker, a fight with Strickland isn't just about rankings or title implications, it's about legacy, timing, and the thrill of finally facing a man whose name has been on his radar for years. I would love to fight Sean Strickland in front of the White House. For one, I think that's going to be a monumental occasion. When are you ever going to be able to fight in front of the White House ever again? But I've been trying to fight Sean for the longest of times, just because I like that fight. Whittaker and Strickland are both former champions navigating a crowded middleweight picture. Israel Adesanya's hiatus and Dricus du Plessis' reign at the top have left the division in an interesting place, and for Whittaker, a matchup with Strickland feels like the right test at the right time. We've been in the same circles for a while. He's still ranked 3, which puts me right back into a conversation that I want to be a part of, and I think it'll be a fun fight. I think it'll be a good fight to watch. I'd love to be on that. Whittaker envisions the bout as a technical and fan-friendly striking affair, a clash between two of the division's most skilled and mentally tough competitors. Strickland's pressure-heavy boxing style against Whittaker's sharp movement and kickboxing arsenal could make for one of the most entertaining fights on the historic card. The symbolism of competing on such a landmark stage only adds to the motivation for the Australian. While the White House event has drawn curiosity and excitement throughout the MMA world, Whittaker's plans mean he's unlikely to compete on the upcoming UFC card in his home country. The organization is set to return to Australia in February, but the former middleweight champ revealed that family comes first this time around. I want to, my head wants to, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I'm having a baby due in a few weeks, and I want to be there for that period. I want to be there for my kids during Christmas. I don't want to be in camp during this period. I've missed a lot of them. That decision underscores Whittaker's maturity and balance at this stage of his career. After years of headlining events and taking on the toughest names in the division, he's in no rush to return unless the right opportunity presents itself. And for him, that opportunity looks like a summer showdown with Strickland on one of the sport's biggest and most unprecedented stages. If Whittaker gets his wish, it would be more than just another fight. It would be a meeting of elite strikers, a potential title eliminator, and a chance for the Reaper to reaffirm his place among the middleweight elite while taking part in one of the most historic moments in UFC history.